Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
So before introducing and hearing from our speaker, our tradition is to introduce ourselves. I suggest you, so we can really take in your name, just take a breath before you say your name. And I'll begin. My name is Michael.
My name's David.
I'm Michael. My name's John.
My name is David.
My name is Ricardo. My name is Cass.
I'm Jack.
Michael.
Jeff.
My name is Kate.
I'm George.
I'm Hal.
I'm Tom.
I'm Brad. I'm Eric.
Silas.
I'm George.
Jose.
Declan.
My name's Myron.
Don.
My name is Alzak.
My name is Mark.
I'm Todd.
I'm Lee.
My name is Garrett.
I'm Michael.
My name is Jerry.
Peter.
Mark.
My name's Mike.
My name is Alan.
I'm Jose.
My name is Manuel.
Rich.
My name is Philip.
My name is Kenny.
I'm Steve.
My name is Robert.
I'm Kaleo.
I'm feeling like Leonardo today.
I'm Joe. And that's
Paul.
Okay, our speaker today is Charles Garfield. Charles is the founder of Shanti and Shanti National Training Institute, founding faculty at Metta Institute End of Life Counseling Program, visiting scholar, Starr King School for the Ministry at the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley, and a mathematician on the Apollo 11 First Lunar Landing Program. Dr. Garfield is a clinical professor of psychology, Department of Psychiatry, University of California Medical School, and a former board member at the C.G. Jung Institute of San Francisco. He has published 10 books, including Sometimes My Heart Goes Numb, Love, and Caregiving in a Time of AIDS, Psychosocial Care of the Dying Patient, and Stress and Survival, the Emotional Realities of Life-Threatening Illness. Welcome, Charles.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind introduction. Thank you all for inviting me. You know, the only part of this presentation I really struggled with was the opening line. I was home, I was walking around thinking, how do I get your attention on a subject that I care about deeply? Beautiful day, Sunday, in a gorgeous city, all sorts of other things that are probably floating through your mind. And how do I get your attention, since attention is so central to what we're doing here? And I realized there was only one opening line that made any sense to me at all. How many of you, by the end of this presentation, would like to be enlightened beings leading a stress-free life? I bet you want to know what's next. If only I had a response to that. If only there was a way to make it stress-free and easy, and we'd walk out of here enlightened. And yet if you live in this area, you find all sorts of folks saying all sorts of things about how one can be enlightened quickly and easily. But the Buddhist tradition says other things. The Buddha was a master list maker. The Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, all these lists of things. But brilliant. In fact, on the Buddha's deathbed, so the story goes, and some of you may know the story a lot better than I do, he was asked for a final teaching, and he said, make yourself a light. Make yourself a light. I think if I have been lucky enough to have made myself at least some kind of light in this world, it came through Shanti. It came through my one great idea in the shower, and I wish you all one great idea in the shower. An inspiration that I followed up on. An inspiration that I hope you follow up on when you get yours, or maybe you have already. I don't know the specifics of your life. Maybe it's already happened for you, but if it has, I would ask you to be greedy and ask for one more great idea in the shower. One more inspiration. And I especially would suggest, at least according to my own experience, that you follow up on it. That you don't let anybody talk you out of it. Because the world will give you many messages about why it can't be done and why they won't let you do it and why this and that will get in the way. The world's messages are frequently messages of obstacle. But if you know in your heart, if you know in your heart that it's the right thing, the thing itself, this is it, then please don't let anybody talk you out of it. How many people know at least something about Shanti's role in this city through the AIDS epidemic? Okay. I can't imagine that too many of you would know. Imagine if I had let folks talk me out of an idea, and I'll tell you what the idea was. But imagine if all of that work, and at the early stages of the epidemic in particular, virtually everybody with AIDS in this city had some contact with Shanti, some supportive contact. I don't mean that it was long and detailed. In some cases, yes. Some cases it was just informational. But in fact, almost everybody with AIDS in this city in the dark days of the epidemic had some contact with Shanti. Imagine if I had let the clergy talk me out of it, the doctors talk me out of it, my psychologist colleagues talk me out of it, the government officials talk me out of it. All of those constituencies and more had reasons for why what I was intending was absolutely impossible and could not be done. And don't even try it because you'll upset all sorts of people. It would have been easy to have believed one or more of those voices. It's not because I'm so courageous. It's not because I'm so bright. It's because when an idea that's constitutionally right for you, an idea that's an expression of your own heart, comes to mind, it's very hard to deny it. It comes with a risk. You come with a risk. You will always remember it like a lost love. A love that didn't pan out if you choose to deny it. Make yourself a light, said the Buddha. Shanti's been my light for 40 years now. It's going to be 40 years. Before the epidemic, Shanti was a cancer program before the epidemic. It started at the Cancer Research. We started at the Cancer Research Institute at UCSF. I was the first mental health professional on that unit. To this day, I can't quite get my arms around that phrase. If I was the first mental health professional on that unit, 40 beds, seriously ill cancer patients in each bed, who took care of the emotional and spiritual needs before I got there? And the answer when I asked the question was, well, the doctors and nurses. I'm glad you're laughing. Good people, bright people. Good at what they did, good at doctoring and nursing, but without much awareness of the spiritual and emotional realities facing people with life-threatening illness. In other words, virtually nobody was taking care of those needs. So I'd walk down the hall, and I was right out of graduate school, and I was long on enthusiasm and short on know-how. You ever been in that place where your enthusiasm was high, but your know-how was no? And I'd look in rooms. I would just look in, I'd walk down the hallway, and I'd look in people's rooms, and more often than not, I would understand something. And I wouldn't know quite what I was understanding, but I would look in people's eyes and I would get what was going on in the room. And then I would visit people for more extended lengths of time and hear their stories, and I would realize I was right. That I knew that there was something that I was picking up. I don't want to make this mysterious. We're going to make it very practical in a moment. I was picking up something that I really got. I got it. I resonated with, like a tuning fork. You knock one tuning fork and the other one starts vibrating. Well, I was vibrating with something that was going on in those rooms. And then I would hear the stories, and I would inevitably hear stories about abandonment. My family doesn't come to visit. My partner's afraid to come. My doc doesn't come and see me very often, and the nurses look at me like I'm problematic, even though many of them are kind. They seem terribly busy, and that my needs are an imposition. How did I understand? I had never been in such a situation before. Why did I understand what was going on, at least to some reasonable degree? What was this resonance I was feeling with abandonment? Fortunately, with a modicum of psychological training and some curiosity, I started looking at my own life. I was the firstborn child in an extended family. If you've ever been burdened with being the apple of other people's eyes and their projections about who you were supposed to be, I was supposed to be the successful one who made everybody happy and proud. But it was a good job. It was better than other roles you could have played. They all said nice things to me and expected things that were good and positive. And everything was fine for 3 years and 3 months until he showed up. My baby brother. Nobody told me about that. And he was sick. So they had to turn their attention away. So for 3 years and 3 months, as this precocious infant who got a lot of attention, this little boy who got a lot of attention, I was suddenly put into my bedroom and told to just play, and just amuse yourself. And I was given an occasional toy, but not much. And I was banished from the kingdom. Why? You can't tell a 3-year-old why. Abandonment. There it was. It was there in my own history, writ large. That was my essential wound. The wound of abandonment, the fear of abandonment, the reality of abandonment in my own history. And now I was seeing it in the eyes of cancer patients who really had something to be concerned about. The bottom line for the wounded healer, the subject of what I'm talking about, we are all potentially wounded healers. The struggle is with the wound itself. The gift is a resonance that wound allows with other people who have similar wounds. It is a form of genius. We've turned, in modern Western culture, we've turned the word genius to get images of Albert Einstein and other extraordinary beings. But the original word genius in ancient Greece referred to something different. It referred to that genius that we all have, that thing itself, that predisposition that we are here for. And for me, it was a resonance with abandonment, that allowed me to understand my usefulness with other people who are going through the same thing. If you can get a handle on what your essential wound is, what is the wound? 2 questions. What is the wound? If you can get a handle on that, you can redeem it as a gift by being useful to other people who have the same wound. By being there for them in a way that allows you to understand what they're going through. What a gift. What a gift. And so Shanti went from 1974 to 1981 taking care of people with AIDS, first at UCSF and then in the community. I wondered, after people were discharged from the medical school, what happened to them? And I realized that the real project I wanted was not based at UCSF at all, but rather based in the community. So I didn't have bureaucrats telling me what I was supposed to do. They only had one real message. Don't make a mistake because the lawyers might get us. That was basically the caution. So we set up in the community, and we were independent and have been ever since independent of any other bureaucracy anywhere. And so for years we did good work, wonderful people like the people who are doing the work now, but with cancer patients until 1981, when I started getting some calls from physician colleagues of mine. And it was very rare that I would get calls from physician colleagues. Usually the patients would call and ask for a volunteer to provide emotional support or practical support. But in 81, something strange was happening. The docs were calling me, and they only wanted to talk to me, and they said, something is going on, we don't know what it is. They called it at the time gay cancer. You remember the history. And there was an urgency around it. And I noticed, and they would ask me if we had had any increase in the number of gay patients who were calling Shanti. They wanted to know. And I said, as a matter of fact, now that you mention it, yes, we're seeing more gay men than we've ever seen before. What do you make of it? And they said, which wasn't very heartening, they said, we don't know. You don't know what the illness is? Yeah, it's gay cancer, but what is it really? I mean, we don't know. And then it became GRID, and then it became AIDS. And then we were in the middle of an apocalyptic challenge, the likes of which none of us were prepared for, ever saw before, understood the mode of transmission. I had to stand up in front of several hundred Shanti volunteers who had come on board. Put yourself in this situation, sitting here, looking at several hundred volunteers who had come on board to be volunteers for cancer patients. That's why they volunteered. And I had to tell them that we were switching our constituency. We were no longer going to take care of only cancer patients. At the beginning, we were going to do both, and then we were going to phase out our work with cancer patients and delegate it to other agencies who fortunately existed. We never abandoned a single cancer patient that we took care of. I know that for a fact because it was one of my battle cries at the time. But we were going to turn our attention to men. It was predominant. We thought it was all men at that point with this new disease. Make yourself a light. Make yourself a light, I kept thinking. In the Buddhist tradition, when we think of light, we think of a bird with 2 wings. The wings are wisdom and compassion. Yes, wisdom and compassion. One without the other, you can't fly with one wing. Doesn't even look right. Wisdom and compassion. We were short on wisdom at the time. Except we knew enough to be there. Compassion we understood. At least we thought we understood. We knew we were not going to abandon people who were in the midst of a plague and who were suffering to a degree that was unimaginable to us. We didn't even know the mode of transmission at the time. I had to say to those several hundred volunteers, you can leave if you wish because you signed on for a cancer project, but if you want to stay, here's what the reality is. And to come across with what those specifics were. And nobody left, and I thought it was peer pressure. Nobody wanted to be the first person out the door. But in the weeks and months that followed, virtually nobody left. And we got more and more new volunteers. An enormous tribute to the gay community in this city and other cities. People came. They volunteered even in the midst of those conditions where we didn't know mode of transmission. People at SF General and elsewhere were wearing spacesuits because they didn't want to touch people. Spacesuits that I remember from Apollo 11. I mean, I knew spacesuits. I knew what I was looking at. And yet people came to volunteer. This is heroism at a very high level. This is heroism. Make yourself a light. It kept going through my mind. Then I came across this quote from James Baldwin, a great writer who should not be forgotten. Baldwin said, the moment we cease to hold each other, the moment we break faith with one another, the sea engulfs us and the light goes out. The light goes out. The danger was that the light might go out. So in that quote came the antidote, came the secret, so to speak. The moment we cease to hold each other, so we must hold each other. The moment we break faith with one another, we must not break faith with one another. The sea engulfs us and the light goes out. We must not let the light go out. That was the Buddha's caution as well. Make yourself a light. Baldwin knew it. So we had to dig deeper into this notion of the wounded healer, because we wanted our volunteers to understand what aptitudes they might have. We're talking about regular people, you and me, who had not had a long history of taking care of people in the middle of an apocalypse. What is it that you can say to people that will give them confidence that what they are offering is useful? If you show people, you, me, what the essential wound is, if we were having lunch together, one-on-one, with each of you, and we were talking about it, and you asked me about mine, and I asked you about yours in terms of what that essential wound was. And if you could identify it, I was not listened to as a child. I was rejected as a child. I was whatever yours is. In my case, abandoned. Was I really abandoned? I wasn't really abandoned. I had two parents who had a sick child, and they were extremely worried about him, the second child, the interloper. He and I are good friends now. We mostly got over it. 70 years later. Takes a while. Be careful of any psychotherapeutic or spiritual endeavor that has 10 sessions attached to it. It takes a while. But if you can teach people that they have an innate form of genius that is specifically related to finding that wound and asking the question, what gift does that wound afford? What group of people might I serve in this world? Compassion. What group of people might I serve in this world? What person might I serve in this world? You don't have to start a project. It could be your best friend. It could be whoever's going through rough stuff right now in your life. What resonance might I have with that person that is sourced in that wound? What is that wound calling me to do? For me, it called me to found Shanti and to be involved with Shanti for 4 decades now. What are the characteristics of the wounded healer? What are the characteristics? Good, we have time to do it. I learned slowly in working with the closest people in my world. If you've ever taken care of the closest people in your world, when they were going through rough stuff. Often the opportunity for wisdom comes in those relationships if we're open to it. My dad was diagnosed with liver cancer in 1990. Sweet man. Just a really, I don't have any bad things to say. Sweet man, just soft, sweet, gentle man. Somewhat quasi-humorously, if you can use humor in with such imagery. He's the kind of man who would have picked liver cancer. He wouldn't have picked a heart attack and disappeared overnight or in the moment. Too harsh on the survivors. He was too sweet. He wouldn't have picked something long, multi-year. Too hard on the survivors. He picked liver cancer where the prognosis was 3 to 6 months. That's my father. No, he didn't really pick it. No, I don't really believe that he made a conscious selection. It just is congruent in some odd way. And so now my real challenge began as a wounded healer. I was taking care of my own father. I was his primary caregiver, although my mother did her job, my brother did his job. But since it was my field of expertise, so to speak, everybody looked at me as if I had secrets. I knew how to make it work. I knew how to make people okay. After all, I was the golden boy grown up now. Now I was supposed to take care of my dad. I was in midlife then, at the height of my powers. Remember being at the height of your powers? Maybe, well, some of you probably are, whatever that means to you. There's a sense that you're knowledgeable. That's what I mean. I don't mean anything ego-inflated by this at all. I just mean there's a sense that you've been around long enough to know some stuff. And I was going to research everything on liver cancer I could, and I was going to really make sure that my dad had access to everything. And this was a time in which a book called Love, Medicine, and Miracles had come out by Bernie Siegel, a surgeon on the East Coast. And he interviewed exceptional patients, people who had bucked the odds, people who had survived when the prognosis suggested that there was no chance, and they made it. And he interviewed many of them, and he produced this videotape of these exceptional patients talking about how they did it. And I thought, this is what I'm going to get from my dad. So I got a copy of the tape, and I went over to my dad's house. And we sat in recliner chairs, parallel recliner chairs, looking at the television. I was serious. Good old Dad was going to have access to the best I could possibly supply. And I popped in the videotape, and it started with these talking heads, exceptional patients who had bucked the odds. And I was going to get interested in this, and I was sure my father would because he was up against it. And I looked over a moment or two later, and he was sleeping. So I quickly thought through all the possible reasons why he would fall asleep in the middle of a intervention of this magnitude, and I thought I was being gracious, and I thought, look, he probably doesn't get a lot of sleep at night, and the recliner's kind of back, and looks kind of comfortable. So I woke him up and I said, Dad, this is important. This is what I told you about. Remember the patients who were supposed to die but didn't? And he said, oh yeah, okay. And he sat up. We sat up in our recliners and we were going to look. Another couple of minutes and we're looking at the tape. He's out cold again. Happened 3 times, and finally I said, Dad, what is going on here? And he was quiet. He looked down. Probably felt like he failed again. And then he started smiling, and he looked at me. And in a voice quite unlike any other voice I ever heard from him, a voice that was clear and resonant and confident, a voice that came from far away, a voice from his soul, said to me, Charlie, I love you. Nobody in my life before or since has ever said I love you with as convincing a tone as that. Nobody. And I've had a few I love yous in my life, but not like that. That came from some faraway place, some level of authenticity that I never knew was in him. I knew he loved me, but it's not like he said it very much, if at all. Love heals. Okay. In the invisible chalkboard I write, love heals. One of the characteristics of the wounded healer. The knowledge that love heals. It doesn't always cure. It doesn't always cure. There's a difference between healing and curing. You can heal spiritually. You can heal emotionally. You can heal psychologically and socially, even if you don't heal physically. And whatever it was, whatever that glitch in our relationship had been, whatever that separation had been, his inability to say those I love yous, my inability to initiate an I love you kind of connection, whatever that was, disappeared in that moment. And it was a backlog of I love yous from then until he died. Love heals. "19 years later, I had the opportunity to take care of my mother when she was dying. Different challenge. Much different. I don't know if you can name the person in the world with whom you have the most conflicted relationship. Imagine yourself as the primary caregiver of that person in their dying time. And imagine it taking place over a period of months and years. It was the hardest thing I ever did, easily. We had our wonderful moments and we had our conflicts. She was a complicated woman, dear, sweet, nasty, manipulative, all of the above, everything. I was not about to abandon my own mother in her time of need. She said to me at one point, this is the kind of thing I was looking at. You'll appreciate it, I think. At one point she looked at me and she said, you know how I want to spend the rest of my time? I said, no, Mom, how do you want to spend the rest of your time? She said, I want to be a published author. She's 92. I said, how are we going to make that happen? She said, I don't know, you've published books. You tell me. That's my mother. I said, have you written anything? She said, as a matter of fact, I have. And she showed me 2 manuscripts. Children's stories. She was an elementary school teacher and she wrote children's stories. So she wrote 2 children's stories. I read both. They both were decent. They were pretty good. So we did some editorial work. And now in this era of self-publishing, you and I can publish whatever we want and get it out in beautiful, beautiful bound editions. And she became a published author. Published 4 books between 92 and 94. And was happy for a time. until she told me one day how frightened she was. I said, "Why are you frightened?" She said, "I don't know where I'm going." And then there's this pregnant pause, and she looks at me. I said, "Mom, are you asking me to tell you where you're going?" She said, "Yeah, it's your field of expertise. Tell me where I'm going." If it had been in the form of a joke, it would have actually been easier to deal with. But she was serious about it. "Where am I going?" I said, "Well, the different traditions have different ideas." And I said, "Would that be useful to go over what some of those ideas are?" She said, "Yeah." We went over a few of them. But in the final analysis, I had to say to her, "Mom, I don't know. I don't know." Not knowing. Aptitude 2 of the Wounded Healer. Not knowing. Comfort with not knowing, or if not comfort, at least an ease with not knowing. Love heals. Not knowing. Can we back off this tendency to be an expert? We see it so often. It's something that I teach at all the Shanti trainings of the new volunteers. I've been doing this for 40 years. There's one coming up next week. Some of the new volunteers, and it's amazing how young they are now. The older I get, the younger they get. And I have to drill this message, it seems. That it's not about pretending that you're a therapist. It's not about pretending that you're a holy man. It's not about pretending anything. It's a comfort with not knowing. And there's so many things we don't know. I took care of my best friend when he was dying, my closest friend. The world understands caring for a parent or a child or a partner. I don't know that the world understands all that well caring for a best friend. I think the gay world understands it fairly well, by and large. But I think the larger society doesn't understand how you can be rocked to the core. The Bay Area is a bit different. I think I'm saying this in a way that's reasonable. I think there are more people who are interested in self-inquiry around here than in many other parts of the world. And there are other places that are like this, but I've traveled an awful lot. It's easy to have your perception skewed by living in the Bay Area and thinking that everybody's interested in Buddhism, of course. You're not interested in Buddhism? You're a heathen? There are places where people don't even know there's an inner world and wouldn't even know it if they tripped over it. That's not a criticism. That's just cultural difference and geographical difference. I took care of my best friend when he was dying. We were very close, good buddies. He was a very well-known psychotherapist, psychoanalyst in this area. He was a member of the Psychoanalytic Institute, professor at Berkeley, and bright guy, wonderful guy. And if you know anything about psychoanalysis, you know, the image you might have, the Freudian image you might have is of the patient lying on a couch and the analyst sitting behind, and the patient talks and the analyst listens and hardly says anything. That's pretty close to the truth, actually. Mm-hmm. But the basic assumption that this man had, this good friend, was that the problem lay in the head of the patient. That's what they all believe. The problem lies in the head of the patient. He grew up with that. He was good at it, too. He knew chapter and verse. He was very diligent. And now he's dying of multiple myeloma, a form of cancer that you don't want to get. at least the version of it that he had, was particularly difficult. People do better with easier versions of it, if one can use the word easy. But he had a very bad version of it. And when he was dying, it was on a Thursday, he died on a Saturday. He was going in and out of waking state consciousness, if you've ever sat at the bedside. I used to think of it as deep sea diving. People close their eyes and they'd be asleep and they'd be out of it because of drugs and illness and just overall systemic fatigue. And every once in a while the eyes would open and they'd look around and realize, I'm still here. Well, he was going in and out of waking state consciousness. Rico was his name. Rico was going in and out of waking state consciousness. And at one point, he woke up and he had this absolutely beatific look on his face that I'd never seen before. It was a look of discovery, a childlike discovery. And he said, relationships, it's all about relationships. This was the man who thought the problem lay only in the head of the patient. And now, less than 2 days before his death, he got that it was all about relationships. And what could I do? Except to sit and nod and say, yeah. Take his hand and say, it's all about relationships. Bearing witness. Bearing witness. I had no great insight to offer in response to his insight. His insight was the thing itself. It was all about relationships. It was all about relationships. And all I could do was to bear witness. The poet says it best. He also serves who only stands and waits. He also serves who only stands and waits. To just sit and be there is enough. You are enough. Your presence is enough. Bearing witness. So the three things that I think are most essential in the life of the wounded healer are love, the knowledge that love heals, a comfort with not knowing, and the awareness that bearing witness is enough. Freud made the observation, very interesting observation. He said, every time I thought I discovered something, I found out a poet had been there before me. I think it's true. I mean, if I were to play off that observation, I would say every time I thought I had a great idea, either a poet or one of the great writers said it way better. A poem called "Asleep of Prisoners." Asleep of Prisoners by Christopher Fry. The human heart can go to the lengths of God. Dark and cold we may be, but this is no winter now. The frozen misery of centuries breaks, cracks, begins to move. The thunder is the thunder of the flows, the thaw, the flood, the upstart spring. Thank God our time is now. When wrong comes up to face us, till we take the longest stride of soul men ever took. Affairs are now soul size. Affairs are now soul size. The enterprise is exploration into God. Where are you making for? It takes so many thousand years to wake. But will you wake for pity's sake? Will we wake for pity's sake? Sometimes get asked by the new Shanti volunteers. I kind of joked before about how young they look to me, but they actually are young. Most of them are in their 20s. And they come to the training because they want skills. If you were going to volunteer at Shanti or anywhere, and you were going to care for people who are up against it, you'd want skills. Say you felt long on enthusiasm but short on know-how. You'd want to, please teach me something that will help me do this work. It's interesting how the most important things I have to teach in that context and in general are human aptitudes, human capacities. It's not specific to the work at all. It's specific to being the kind of person we would like to be in the world. 3 things. Listening from the heart, holding the other person as if they were the focus of the meditation, listening from the heart, speaking from the heart, speaking from direct experience, your own story and its truths as best you know it, and acting from the heart. Acting from the heart. Doing what you do in service to the other person for their benefit. For their benefit. And asking when you're not sure. Listening from the heart. Speaking from the heart. Acting from the heart. Each of those are aptitudes. Aptitudes that can be cultivated. You can get better and better and better at each of these. They can become so much a part of who you are that you don't even think of themselves as skills anymore. You think of them the way artists think of their accomplished artists think of their artistry. And when great artists do what they do, dancers, painters, singers, musicians, those involved in oratory, when they do what they do, they don't think of step 1, step 2, then do this, then it becomes part of who they are. It becomes part of who they are. And if you had to pick one, and this is for the new volunteers and for any other human beings that are interested, listening from the heart. Get great at listening from the heart. People know when you are there. They know when your presence is real. They know when you're attending fully. 70 to 90% of the information we send to one another is sent non-verbally. Non-verbal. An enormous amount of information that we send to one another is sent non-verbally. People will know if you are listening from the heart, or they'll know whether you're looking at your watch or wondering about lunch or who the cute guy is down the block. They'll know. So I'll finish with this observation. Just finished writing a memoir. It's quite an interesting challenge, memoirs. Ego says this and soul says that, and other voices say what they say, and you wonder, whose voice is that? And there's sort of a convention with many memoirs, not all, that you put a quote up front. So I'll leave you with the quote that I chose for the memoir up front. I chose the James Baldwin quote that I mentioned earlier. The moment we cease to hold each other, the moment we break faith with one another, the sea engulfs us and the light goes out. If we follow the Buddha's instruction, make yourself a light, we by definition make ourselves that light that disallows the illumination from going out. You guys are great.
I think we have a couple of minutes for questions. If
Oh yeah,
anyone
absolutely.
has a question.
Questions, observations, anything that you care to bring up. Please.
In dealing with your mother, you said that she was sort of like the wounded puppy that you tried to help and she bites you. So how would you summarize a few key things on how could we approach that person?
Understand that you can't fix it all. Understand that you can't fix the whole situation. We go in often with the intention of fixing, but you fix machines, you don't fix people. Understand that even helping from a position of superiority is also dysfunctional. We serve. I did the best I could to answer her questions, and my best had to be enough. Often it was frustrating. I knew it was going to be in some ways. Our whole life together was frustrating in ways. But there was no way to make it beautiful and blissful and lovely and easy. I knew it was going to be a challenge throughout, and it was. But we got to a good place at the end. Allow it to evolve, play out over time. Say the I love yous that need to be said. And then know that relationships have a character of their own, and they will play out according to that character. There's no way that you can fix it and make it blissful and beautiful. I wish I had an easy answer. Yes, please.
So, just an observation. Yesterday, a friend of mine died who lived on the street for 30 years. And it was, you helped me understand that it was just about being a witness for him, in those final days, and not giving in to the temptation to call 911 against his wishes.
Mm-hmm.
He was struggling with a neurological disease that was slowly debilitating. And they would have patched him up and put him back out on the street again, and he didn't. He was ready to go. So, there's no little turmoil in understanding my inaction, but you helped me understand it.
Good. Thank you.
We have time for one more question.
I'm wondering if you could say something about just being the silent presence, listening with the heart.
Bearing witness, being a silent presence, is often the most important, powerful thing we can do in situations in which doing is no longer the primary expression of our humanity. There are situations, perhaps the one that you mentioned. I had a friend that died on Thursday, where at the end, the person that was with my friend could only hold him, and that was all. Sometimes sitting in quiet, sometimes meditating in quiet, sometimes holding one's hand, the other person's hand, is all we can do. The poet said it best. We also serve who only stand and wait. In other words, to sit and to be there is the gift itself. We have such an action-oriented culture. This is a culture, it's bizarre. We talk about active listening. Only in an action-obsessed culture. I mean, it's like saying active listening? Active contemplation? I mean, it's like the action imperative has to be attached to every conceivable thing. No, that's what the challenge is. That's how we trip ourselves up. Perfect as you are the contemplative side of your nature. That's what will see you through.
Thank you.
Bless you all.
So next week's speaker will be Sean Fite. And Sean teaches the Dharma as a path of inquiry and integration and draws on 20 years of devotion to meditation and yoga. His teachers include Jack Hornfield, Sylvia Borstein, and Eugene Cash. Yeah, in the past he's done chanting with us, which is great. At GBF, one of our traditions is to ask for dana. Dana is a Sanskrit and Pali word meaning generosity, cultivating generosity or giving. This can be characterized by unattached and unconditioned generosity, giving and letting go. GBF asks for a weekly donation of $10 or more to meet our expenses. This includes our rent, the speaker honorarium, newsletter production and mailing costs, and the Larkin Street Youth Center dinner. Our host will be coming around at the social time with our Dana Bowl. We appreciate your continued support that sustains our wonderful Sangha. I have an announcement, or really more of an update. As many of you know, historically the governing body at GBF is called the Steering Committee, and the present Steering Committee is sort of fairly newly incarnated. It includes Michael Altschuler, who's here, and Jerry Jones, Richard Azzolini, who's not here, Peter Washburn, our treasurer, who is here, and myself. And we're, to be consistent with our bylaws and the sort of requirements of nonprofit organizations, we're making a transition to calling ourselves a board of directors. And one of the things we've come up with is an organization chart that establishes really clear lines of communication between our various committees and volunteer tasks. I think this is something that's been missing, and we've had some problems in the past because of that. So because we want to be transparent, I've put some copies of this out on the table with some Post-its and some pens. If you want to make any comments about this, you're free to do that. Anything to add to that? Okay. Other announcements? Do we have a host today? Yeah.
Oh. That would be me.
That would be you.
Oh yeah, let me remember now. There are treats out there. There's hot water for tea. Wash your cup when you're done. People gather at the door about, 12:30? If they'd like to have lunch together. What am I missing?
There's a sign-up sheet on the table. Or
If you're a member.
that's it. Any other announcements?
Yeah, if anyone would be kind enough to look a number up for me on their smartphone after this, I'd be much obliged.
Okay, if there are no other announcements, let's gather in a circle for our dedication to merit. By the power and truth of this practice, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. May all never be separated from the sacred happiness which is without sorrow. And may all live in equanimity, without too much attachment or too much aversion, believing in the equality of all.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.